Elon Musk is stirring the hornet's nest again, and this time it's about George Floyd. And of all the nests to stare, I think the George Floyd one is the worst one to poke it because uh, that caused billions of dollars of damage. That case in itself was a terribly controversial case, and this guy seems to like controversy. Like, for instance, um, he just seems to be poking at all the right wing talking points, and he seems to have given up any sense of political correctness and just likes stirring the pot. And I wonder, is it that is it ketamine fueled, or is it just that he has this coat of justice, this crusade of justice that he believes he has the right to embark upon. Now, the George Floyd case is it's a controversial case, and I do understand the points that people are making about it. But coming from Elon Musk, it's laced with a tinge of racism, a tinge of Hitlerism, because given that he's done Roman salutes before, and he's supporting far right figures in Germany and in Europe. He's against racism. He's against what you call this immigration. He's from apartheid South Africa, and his father is a well-known racist. So forgive me if I am skeptical of his impartiality when judging the George Floyd case. Now, you know what? If you look at the George Floyd case, yes, many people think it was woke. It was peak woke, but I think you have to look at the things like the eggshell theory. The eggshell theory is whereby if you let's say if it's coming from the fact that if you tap someone on the head and they have a thin skull and you off them, that you have the liability for that person's death, irregardless of the amount of force that you perpetuated. So that's the substantial that's the actual theory in George Floyd case. The fact that he was kneeling on George Floyd's neck, and George Floyd was telling him that he couldn't breathe, and he did nothing for 3 extra minutes after he said he couldn't breathe, means that he was liable for his death, irregardless of the underlying conditions of fentanyl use, of hypertension, or heart disease. It's kind of like negligence, gross negligence, and also the fact that George Floyd does not die without that guy kneeling on him is a major factor of his contributing to Derek Chauvin's culpability. If you were not kneeling on him, the dude does not die. Simple as that. Now, some people would argue that this kneeling practice was part of his training, that it was standard police operating procedure in handling a suspect. But here with George Floyd, we have a person who was saying that he couldn't breathe. So just because you are trained to do a hold or a procedure doesn't mean that you're a robot and you close your ears and you ignore the obvious distress the person was in. That's malpractice, and that's gross negligence. So as soon as he had, and I believe that this was brought on in court, whereby the training manuals and how the hold was applied, and the limits to the hold application, all those things were brought up in court, and it was seen that he was negligent. He none of the officers there said, "Okay, man, it's enough." You can hear the guy stop is crying out, and even worse, he stopped responding, he stopped moving, and he stopped breathing. So at that time, if you if the guy was wiggling and jiggling and crying out for his mother, and then he stops moving, I think that's about the right time to stop putting your knee on his neck. So that's something against George Floyd, regardless of the underlying condition. Now, they say that George Floyd was a fentanyl addict, and I believe that he could have been a fentanyl addict. He could have had some conditions, but how do you know that guy could have lived for another 5 years without that happening to him? Maybe he could have lived for another 1 week, or another 10 years. We never know. Or he could have been hit by a car after 1 month. But the main substantial factor that contributed to his demise was the knee on the neck. So this thing about him dying from an overdose is just ignoring the very obvious fact that someone stopped his breathing. The weight of Derek Chauvin was substantial in restricting his diaphragm, his movement. And besides the fact that the guy was screaming out and saying he couldn't breathe, and the people, everyone but the police officers, could see that the guy was dying. So uh, it's what he did was beyond reasonable force. It was just negligence. And also, you should be monitoring the the suspect. If you are administering such a significantly dangerous hold, you should be monitoring the suspect for signs of life, for his response, because you are kneeling on a person's neck. A chokehold can render someone unconscious within 10 seconds. And that's we've seen that from UFC. We know that from just martial arts. The neck is very sensitive. It has the jugular vein and several arteries that are very sensitive. And some people have say that he was not really kneeling on his neck. He was kneeling on the upper part of his back. Well, I saw the video. It was very close to the neck. And besides that, he was restricting his diaphragm. And the guy was again yelling out that he couldn't breathe. He was gargling. The man was in distress. So I understand that there is the political angle of it being a racialized situation, and the racial dynamics where it play with the jury, the media, and all the people who were it was a very politically charged situation, and some people may argue that it was a trial by mob, you know, and that makes sense in a way, because there have been similar cases with cops whereby they got lesser sentences, so that can be argued. But this nonsense that he was not liable for the death, It's just not. It's just Elon Musk being a Nazi again.